Hey guys, I'm so excited. We're back here with another episode of the Disruption Podcast. It's your boy Ankur Garg with my co-host
Ludwig Araujo. What's up, everyone?
Ludwig. Today we have a very special guest.
Yeah,
This guy's probably the smartest person I know, which I know because of the amount of quotes and books and podcasts and things he's constantly telling me to check out. More importantly, he's got a Harvard law degree,
Okay.
was a highly successful investment banker. And he was just like, I don't feel like I've challenged myself enough. Let me just start my own investment fund. And he's been running his investment fund, Ridgewood Investments, for over 20 years now.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my proud pleasure to introduce Ken Majmudar.
Thank you, Ankur.
What's up, man?
Ludwig. Great
How
to
are
see
you?
you.
Good to see you.
Don't you just want me at all your introductions?
Definitely.
It's like the perfect
Just
hype man.
just send me your schedule and I'll slot you in as often.
I'm
as
pretty
possible.
sure I have your schedule on my calendar.
You actually do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess let's tell people at home how you and I met, right? And then we'll talk about ways that you've disrupted throughout your life and everything, and then things that you've seen. I think the thing I'm most excited about is that Ken knows everything about everything. We could ask him about stocks. We could ask him about crypto. We could ask him about social media influencers. He'll start naming influencer after influencer and telling us like 3 days ago they posted X, Y, and Z.
Oh, nice.
It's quite impressive. I don't know how you keep up with it all.
You're saying I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none.
No, I'm saying you're a genius at everything.
Okay.
Right? Like, have you ever done the Mensa test?
No.
I feel like that would be a curious score because you'd have to be in that, what is it, 150, 180? Einstein was like a 180 or something like
Was
that.
he?
Yeah.
I'm definitely nowhere near as smart as Einstein, but I would say that I'm curious and interested in a lot of things, and I think that that's actually probably the biggest part of it.
Intellectual curiosity. Love
Yeah.
that.
So I moved to Springfield, right? And I realized I needed an office because I had just gotten laid off from Cellularity. And, I had a great time there for 3 years, but jumpstarting AKG Creative was probably in my best interest. And I was looking around for office spaces. And, WeWork was kind of like the immediate go-to. Let me hop on a train. Let me go to New York and WeWork. But WeWork won't let you bring cameras inside WeWork. They literally kick you out as soon as you try. Even if you like have it in your backpack, if they're walking around the floor and security sees a camera, they kick you out immediately.
Wow.
I looked at Industrious, Roundtable, Berkeley Heights, Lifetime Work. No one will let you film on site. And so like none of this was going to pan out for me. And so then Regis, that does let you film, but it's just outrageously priced. It didn't make any sense. So just getting my own office, it wasn't going to work for me.
Right.
So I started Googling local offices, and all of a sudden, Flexwork and Jay pops up, and it's in Springfield, the town I live in. And I'm like, this is amazing. I need to find out. So I start Googling, and I'm like, yo, there's a brown man who wants this. So there's a Daisy Connection opportunity here. I reach out. Ken was so gracious to set aside some time to connect with me. And one thing I've learned about Ken is he likes to learn about everyone, right? And he's very curious. And he's one of those guys that will be the best read of character probably within 5 minutes and know everything about you, from like your body language, from the stuff that you talk about, whether or not you have an ego. So I think Ken had a read on me instantly. And I pretty much asked Ken, like, hey man, like could we do some type of partnership, or could you help me out with when I'm restarting my life and what I need to do? And Ken gave me a spot in his office.
Nice.
Is that how you remember it?
Yeah, I didn't know all those details about how many places you'd been to that turned you down before you came.
Oh no, they
approached
didn't
it
necessarily turn
differently.
me down,
Yeah.
but
No, I mean,
yeah.
I didn't know about the camera thing, but
The camera thing was a big deal, right? And then I'm like, Ken, can I bring cameras?
Yeah.
And he's like,
content.
yeah, I shoot content too. Let's make it happen. And
Yeah.
so then Flexwork Studio was born quite shortly thereafter.
yes, that's right. Well, yeah, that's pretty much how I remember it. The backstory before that happened was that I bought this building that we're in, and I had an idea to turn it into a co-working space because while I wanted a permanent home for my investment firm, and we have multiple offices, so we have folks in Southern California as well.
Okay.
We didn't need all the space that was in the building. But I loved the location. And so I ended up buying the building, renovating it to the standard of the office that I would want to be in.
Yep.
And then my timing was so excellent, the pandemic just happened, right? So nobody's looking for office space. But, it was great because I could actually go to the office. So at least there was a place for me and my assistant, Dina. So we were here every day, and it was basically empty, but I loved the way the office was. I loved the location. Interesting enough, then I had a couple of interns and they created all the website and everything that ultimately led to the Google search that got you here. That was years later. But yeah, and then when you walked in, I liked you, as a person, like you were saying, a quick read. And I liked your energy. I liked kind of how you were thinking about things. And actually, I liked that you had this background in shooting and media and all of that. And I had already had the idea. I had started my podcast, which is an audio-only podcast called Compound Ideas. But I had the idea like, hey, we have all this extra space. Like, let's create a podcast studio. But my problem was like, I don't know anything about like actually running or like doing a podcast studio, right? Because it's a whole other set of things. So when you came in, and it was within like the first 20 minutes or something, we talked about that. And I was like, this could be perfect. Like you could, you're the person I've been looking for. And there's been a lot of things in my life like that I set as an intention. And I just like plod along, like just keep trying. And I do believe there's something to this idea of like, I don't know what you call it, the secret or visualization or serendipity, manifestation. So I think that it's interesting, like how you had the exact opposite synchronicity of you were looking for what I had, and I was sort of looking for what you had.
Serendipitous.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So it's your first time in the studio with like the full podcast setup.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's cool. Love it.
You got the lights on you. You got the mixer board. We have an engineer.
Yeah.
It's come a long way
in
the past 6 to 8 months since we kind of started.
Yeah. And by the way, and this is our like quote unquote temporary podcast studio,
right?
Because we're about to build out multiple studios and multiple spaces in the space we have in the basement. But yeah, I mean, I remember after that you came up with. I asked you because this was like one of my challenges, right? It's like, oh well, I had this idea. It's like, what would it look like? Let's like create a plan. And literally the next day he sent me like a giant Excel spreadsheet and like a bunch of details and like renderings and all that. So I was like, okay, this guy's like on the ball.
Yeah.
Of course, none of it happened that way, which is a whole separate thing, but that's fine. I knew it wouldn't, so it wasn't like a surprise that way. But then I was like, okay, well, we have this room where we're sitting right now. So obviously we'll need to do a few things. And it's like, what kind of budget do we need? And, it was you did it very modestly. It looks fantastic. And so that's it. And then you pretty much did the rest. I really had to do very little.
That's awesome. I mean, I've seen the renders for downstairs. I can't wait for that to happen. I know that we're getting started construction probably within the next 2 weeks or so.
Yeah, soonish.
So, I mean, stay tuned, everyone, for what this is going to become. I mean, the options are going to be endless for people to come here and create content. So, yeah, it's exciting. And
the thing is, besides the point about, manifestation and serendipity, is being open, I'm very entrepreneurial. And I think a big part of that is just being open, right? Mm-hmm. Like all kinds of people have contacted me. Different people have looked at offices, and I'm just open. I stay open. So when you walked in, I wasn't like looking at it as like skeptically. I'm just like, okay, let me get to know this guy and let me know, let's see what he wants or what he has to say. I remember at the time, things have really developed with AKG, but I mean, at the time you had just left the previous firm. So, as anyone knows who's left a job, it's not like you're not flush with cash, but I liked your energy. And so we worked something out.
So I think the part about you that impressed me the most is as I started digging deeper into Ken's background right after that first meeting, I was just like, wow, like this guy has really done quite a lot in his career of creating this investment fund. And then getting an understanding that you went through the journey where the first couple of years you were in the red, right? Just still building what you were doing with your practice. And then at one point you hit the point of being in the black, mm-hmm. and then you got everyone else in the black that was with you. And then now you're established, at least in my opinion. I'm sure in your world there's larger investment funds people that you talk about.
Yeah, we're actually kind of, we're not big,
But perspective for those of us that are eating Chipotle lunches right now, and versus guys that are managing the size funds that you're managing, it's quite impressive.
Yeah, in some ways it was actually in a way better, but in a way worse for me. So because I have this background educationally, I got, into investment banking, which is it's a field that just as an employee, you can make a lot of money. And so I was doing well, and, I was making like a really, really good salary, call it high 6, low 7 figures in my, late 20s, early 30s. So, we all know about this concept of the golden handcuffs. And so it's like, how do you leave that? So the thing is, like, my issue when I started Ridgewood Investments wasn't so much like, okay, well, I have no money to eat or pay my rent because I had worked and I saved and I invested. But the issue is more every month that goes by, every year that goes by, my opportunity cost is massive, right? Mm-hmm. So the delta between what I'm doing right now, where I'm making no money or actually losing money in the first few years, to what I would be doing if I just gave up and like took a job, it's like a lot of money, right? But the way I got onto it was 2 things. One is I was in and around lower Manhattan, where my whole investment banking career was, when 9/11 happened. And it was extremely traumatic for the city. And for me personally, I didn't even know anyone personally that, who lost their life, but just the whole thing that happened to the place that I love, the New York area. And but then it got me thinking, and I kept thinking, like, what could I do? And that led me to the entrepreneurial path. And again, sort of another example of, I would say, visualization or something, is right at that time, I was like at some random like flea market, not even in New Jersey, like it was like out of state somewhere with my wife. And I found this book and it was like 50 cents. And it was something related to like, it was like the dream conversion process from this guy who like came up with this whole thing. And so I did the exercises in the book. And one of the things was you write your own obituary, the one you want it to be. And I've recommended that exercise to a lot of people subsequently. And it was just pivotal for me because when I did that, I was like, I'm not on that path, and what I wanted in mind was that I had created some great companies from scratch that employed a bunch of people and created all this value and gave me complete freedom in my life, which you don't have that in a job. No matter how great, like an investment banking job, I was still, I was getting paid really well, but you're working for the man. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
And those are intense hours.
And intense hours too. I mean, as you get more senior, which I started to get, it's less about your personal time being intense, but then you have to travel a lot. You have to bring the business in. You have to build the relationships, and you're very limited, right? So, like at the time, I was a satellite investment banker within communications. So I took Garmin public.
Wow.
Yes,
Okay.
the companies like that. DirecTV, we sold DirecTV. Of course, we're the advisors to them. But, so they give you a list of like, okay, here's the 10 or 20 companies in this area. Just like stay on top of those ones. Make sure they like you. Make sure, you're doing a good job with them. And then it's sort of like a, quid pro quo. So since you're doing all of that for free, every once in a while, they'll give you a piece of business or, get you into the deal. That's generally basically how it works. And it's just like Harvard MBAs, but those kinds of people. But ultimately, it's like a real estate brokerage model, right? You get a piece of the transaction when you do it. So when you take them public, you get a piece of that. Or you sell the company, you get a piece of that. So it's very much a brokerage type model. But it's at a very high level where you're dealing with the CEOs and the C-suite of these giant companies.
So we're talking about 2001, actually, right? So 9/11 happens. You get this book. I mean, was this within the same time frame, a couple months right after? And then you just left the firm and started your own investment firm?
Yeah, the way I remember it was I was very unhappy. By the way, so the 9/11 happens, and like a week or two later, they open up like a temporary office, and it's literally right next to Ground Zero, and like overlooking Ground Zero every day. By the way, I was having breathing issues. I'm sensitive, and then and I remember, folks were like laughing, like, "What are you talking about?" And then all this stuff comes out, like
oh, yeah,
years later, But I used to wear a mask down there for whatever reason, because I was sensitive to it. But yeah, I was just like, I don't want to be in this environment anymore. So that I was already, you know, not like, I'm not built to work for the man like my whole life. That's just not my thing. I'm Gujarati, by the way, right? And Gujaratis are famously known for being entrepreneurial. They own a lot of like small scale businesses right from when they came here. So I grew up with that culture around me of like, you know, your goal in life is not to work for other people. Your goal in life is to be free and own your own business. That was the cultural milieu in which I grew up as a little kid. So that was always like in the back of my mind, the seed that was there. But it was like, I didn't have an idea of like, what am I going to do? What can I do? I can't be an investment. I can't open up my own investment banking firm. You need too much capital, too much reputation, et cetera, that I didn't have. So I was just racking my brain. But then when 9/11 happened, I was like really intensely like wanting to do something on my own. And I remember it came to me kind of like in a dream. So I had this like, you did this stuff and, you know, so I realized like I'm not on the path I need to be on, but I didn't know what path that I should be on. And then I just kept thinking about it. What can I do? What can I do? What can I do on my own? And meanwhile, I'd been interested in investing my whole life. So like Warren Buffett, I would read all his letters the day they came out, read the books that he recommended, et cetera, et cetera. So I've had these two separate threads. So I'm thinking after 9/11, like, what can I do? What can I do? It was like December. So this was a few months after the actual thing happened. And literally like in a dream, I remember waking up and it was like fully formed idea. Wait, you could do investing for other people. So this is again, another example of when you're focusing on something intensely, asking, what's the answer? Then that's when
it comes.
Subconscious or visualization or manifestation can happen.
Wow. That's crazy. So you start Ridgewood Investments next day?
No, because I'm waiting for my bonus, first of all.
Right.
So in banking, I don't know if a lot of people know, like your base salary, at least back then, was actually relatively low. So call it like you get a 6-figure base, maybe like 100K, and then like 70, 80, 90% of your comp is bonus once a year. And it's very political, by the way, even though it's supposed to be merit. So, you know, every year you're just like kind of like wondering what's going to happen. And, you know, it's basically like whoever is powerful in the firm at that time gets a say. And they're basically like, okay, this guy and that guy is my guy. So you got to take care of them. And so everybody's like in somebody's circle, and whoever's left outside the circle, they're the ones that get screwed.
Yeah.
Because all the money's gone basically.
Right.
So you just never knew. But yeah, so you have to wait, you know, and just like get your bonus. But that was why, like financially, I had gotten paid, you know, reasonably well. I'm a saver, not a spender. I didn't really ramp up my lifestyle. First 2 years, actually, right out of Harvard Law School, I stayed with my parents in Jersey City. Nice. And so I was like commuting, you know, had a Timex Ironman watch, you know, it cost me $30. So I pretty much saved a lot of money, and I wasn't into going out or any of that stuff. And I'm good at investing. So you can imagine that by the time 7 years rolls around, you know, like I've got some financial flexibility. I'm not worried about like, hey, how am I going to survive this year?
So you leave the firm. Is there at any point an issue with you taking on investment clients? Is there like a non-compete with? No issues there.
Well, because remember, I was an investment banker. What that is very different than an investment manager, which is what I do now. Got it. So as an investment banker, you're working with giant companies, and you're just helping them raise, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars, or, you know, things along those lines. You know, advising big companies about finances or mergers and acquisitions. But what I switched to, so I couldn't do that as an independent. At least I didn't think so at that level. Because you have to basically convince the C-suite and the board of a company that they should hire you, right? If you just started, you know, hung out your shingle, like they're never going to do that, right? Oddly enough, I actually got a call from one of my clients in investment banking right in that transition period. And they said, hey, you know, we'd love you to consult for us. So I actually made like sort of a semi-aggressive proposal to them, and it got back to my old employer, and they just like put the kibosh on it, right? Because it would threaten their franchise.
Of course.
So you know, that's just the nature of that business, and I knew it, so I didn't really expect much there. But on the investment management side, that's why I kind of picked it. Is there's millions of people that need this help, and right now they're going to who Merrill Lynch or Morgan Stanley or whoever, and they're brokerage arms, or these independent firms that have left those brokerage firms. And I felt that in general the culture of that business and the general level of
customer service,
expertise, service, whatever, I felt I could do better. But I mean, obviously, and the good thing about it is you only need a handful of people to get going.
Yeah.
And so I just, that's how I started. I went to
how long did that take? Where you started to see that this was something that was a good decision for you?
Well, again, remember my opportunity cost was really high. So from that perspective, it took a long, long time. But from the perspective of, hey, I could get clients, I mean, basically what happened was, first of all, I didn't know how you do it, right? Like I went to Harvard Law School, so people think that you know everything about like legal stuff. You actually don't learn anything except like these very like intellectual cases and things like, you're reading like what the Supreme Court ruled on like, affirmative action or something.
Right.
But like, you really don't have any idea how to actually like form a corporation.
Right.
Like, you know how to fight about it if it ever gets to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
But like, I just practically didn't know, like, how do you set up a company? What do you need to do? Like, what are the steps? And also investment management is a highly regulated area. So I didn't really know, like, how do you, like, okay, what do you need? Like, do you need a license? Like, what do you do? But I just basically like, so once I knew like this is what I want to do, then I just sort of started backfilling. And so I just pretty much like, I hired an attorney, he formed the thing, and I learned how to form a thing.
Yeah.
And then, you get a tax ID, you open up a bank account. It's like, okay, that's cool. And then I went to ask people like, well, how do you start managing investments for people and charge them for that? And so I remember my first custodian was Fidelity Investments. So the guy at Fidelity said, oh, this is what you got to do. You got to file this paperwork over here. And I actually did it myself. It wasn't obviously like too difficult, especially for a Harvard Law School person to like read instructions and fill out a form. So that's what I did. And then I got my approval within like a month or two, and I'm off to the races. And my first clients were my parents, who I had already been managing their investments, just not charging them anything.
Right.
I actually had to charge them for the first. Actually, I still do. So sorry, mom and dad. But and then my in-laws said, "Hey, now you're doing it. We want you to help us." And then a friend of my wife's. That was my first 3 clients. Then I had another client. All our clients still today. That was 22 years ago that I'm talking about. And then I had my 4th client, which was kind of like the game changer, because I mean, it's like you still don't know if you have a viable business if you have your parents and your in-laws as 2 of your 3 clients. Right. That might not be quite on merit. But I got a client who had sold a company. He had gotten a good chunk of change, and by all rights, I shouldn't have had any chance to get him as a client. He's still also a client today. An excellent guy, a doctor. He's created billions of dollars of value for people through medical devices. So he sold his first company, and I knew him personally for about 5 or 6 years. He was looking for some help with that initial chunk of money that he got. And he interviewed me, and he interviewed a bunch of people, and he picked me, even though at that time that more than doubled my assets that I was managing. So he was my 4th client, 4th or 5th. And he said, yeah, you were passionate, and and I trust you. So I'm going with you.
It's amazing.
And that was a game changer.
It is.
Yeah.
So fast forward, 2008 comes, right? The financial collapse, the crisis. At this point, I'm sure you have a bunch of clients, and Lehman Brothers, right? They're going out of business. How did you navigate that? How did that affect your business? Because I'm thinking, at that point, people are pulling their money out of the market. Their house is on fire, that type of thing.
No, actually, none of that happened to me. I'm very consistent in terms of saying that the only thing that makes sense, at least to me, is long-term investing. That's the power of investing is really comes from compounding, right? And actually, people first of all, people don't understand compounding because a small amount of gain per year, when you do it for long enough, turns into a lot of money, right? So like a couple of examples of this. Do you guys ever hear that sort of apocryphal story about somebody comes to the king and says, the king wants something. He says, well, all I want is you take 1 grain of rice and put it on the first square of the chessboard and simply just double it as you go down. So 64 times you double the 1 grain of rice and the king is bankrupt, right? But there's not enough rice in the world probably.
Right.
Because those last few doubles are incredible. That's an example of compounding.
Yep.
And also people hear about like Manhattan Island, the Indians sold it for whatever, like $20 some. But if you compounded that money today, it'd probably be worth more than Manhattan Island if you could consistently compound it. So people underestimate the power of long-term compounding. And that's really our whole foundation. And so that's all I pretty much talk about. I talk about risk management and I talk about knowing what you own and these basic things. That's also what Warren Buffett talks about. But it's really powerful. And so since I'm very consistent and I take an educating approach where I try to teach people, this is how to think about it, not the way you are going to think about it left to your own sort of devices. Generally speaking, I'm like 07, 08. I mean, say I have hundreds of clients, only a handful would have called me. And most of them were ones that maybe became clients in the last year or two. And so their first experience of working with me is, oh my God, my portfolio went down.
Yeah.
Even before, I didn't even know that was going to happen right away. But even before, I walk them through long-term investing and how there will be times when it'll be uncomfortable and your portfolio is going to be down a lot and you're going to be scared. Mm-hmm. And the right thing to do is nothing. Because we already did the right things ahead of time and we're going to continue to do the right things. And then over time, it's just going to work out. So I would say the vast majority, a very small percentage of people, they're so emotionally driven that no matter how much you would educate or show them data or beg them, they just can't help it, right? The pain of that emotional reaction is so strong that it overwhelms all other things, logic, whatever. And so those are the folks you just, I can't help them.
Yeah.
But everyone else, I've sort of almost immunized them ahead of time with education. And then I just repeat the same thing. And they're like, oh yeah, I do remember you telling me that, 2-3 years ago. I said, well, this is what I was talking about. And the right thing to do is nothing. And they're like, oh, okay. All right, good. And then after a while, when you see the results, they're actually working. And now you're getting wealthier and you've had a double or maybe 2 doubles. At that point, if my phone rings, it's sort of like, oh, this is one of those opportunities, right? Can I send you money? I have some money. Can we put it to work? That's how that really
That's the
works.
favorite phone call, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it works for them, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now the branding questions, right? Why call it Ridgewood Investments? Where did that name come from?
Well, if you know my last name is Majmudar, Majmudar Investments doesn't quite have the ring,
That could be tough.
Yeah,
I can understand.
So I was looking for something superior to my last name, first of all. But at the time, I was living in New York City when I started the firm. That's where my investment banking job was. And we were looking to move to, so my wife was pregnant. It's actually really interesting. So my wife went to Harvard Business School. So at the time when I left, so after 9/11 and I left, my wife got pregnant just a few months before 9/11 with our first child. I had purchased a house to move here. So that was being renovated. My wife was in business school, so no income coming in. I've now left my job, so no income coming in. And kid on the way. And then I started business. And so I was like, no prospect of any income coming in for a while. But, you just work through it, But what happened with the name was, so I was like, I'm pretty sure Majmudar Investments is probably not what I want to go with. We were looking for houses somewhere in that time frame. And so it was like, okay, well, what town do you go to? So we were looking at Short Hills and Ridgewood, New Jersey, two great towns. I really couldn't afford either one, to be honest, at the time, especially under those circumstances. So we ended up going to South Orange, which is a couple towns over. It's actually very close to where we're sitting. And so I ended up sort of in the Short Hills area. But I was like, Ridgewood is a nice name because you got ridges and woods and it's all like naturalistic stuff. And, it just seems like it rolls off the tongue. So I was like, okay, let's go with Ridgewood Investments. So I moved to Short Hills and I named it Ridgewood Investments. I mean, not Short Hills, but the Short Hills area. So if I joke that if I had moved to the Ridgewood area, it might be called Short Hills Investments. I don't know.
That's funny.
It is funny. Did you think that at any point that it's a common name, right? Other Ridgewood Investments exist?
No other Ridgewood Investments, but there's like Ridgewood Capital, there's Ridgewood this and that, Ridgewood Bank. There's a Ridgewood in Queens. So every year around tax time, we get multiple, like not a lot, but like a couple of emails from somebody looking for the other one. Yeah. And they're like, you didn't send me my tax documents. Like, you're not a client of ours, like this is, you think you've got the wrong company. That didn't, it didn't happen. But actually, and I knew that ultimately it didn't even matter that much. I mean, I could have called it Majmudar Investments, just like nobody can pronounce it and it gets butchered all the time. But so I had read David Ogilvy on branding or something. This was a while ago. I didn't really get it, to be honest, but I did read it. So that tells you I'm not a marketing brain, really. My brain works differently. But I think it was in there or somewhere where I got the concept that a brand is simply an empty container. So it's like a bank account. You just open a bank account. There's nothing in it. And the value of that brand over time is based on the deposits you make or the withdrawals you make, based on what you do, right? The actions you take, the sort of the idea of goodwill. Did you build goodwill? So, so it didn't matter really, but I picked that container. And then over time, I tried to make little deposits through whatever reasons,
Does branding have a compounding effect?
Absolutely.
100%. I mean, you look at the biggest brands in the world, like say CocaCola, which has been around forever. And Buffett says this, right? Like, he's like, if you gave me, whatever, pick a number, $100 billion and said, recreate the Coca-Cola brand from scratch, I'd give it back to you and say it couldn't be done. Right?
I don't know. With $100 million, I could do some magic.
$100 billion.
$100 billion, I could do some real magic.
You could do magic, but the Coca-Cola brand is arguably worth way more than that because in billions of minds, it's associated with things in their life or like, that, what was that jingle? And like, I'd like to give the world a Coke, I mean, there's so much association and value and goodwill associated with that even 100, you can't just buy that. No. It has to be created over a long, long period of time. That's also why, like in the 80s, I don't know if you remember, because I remember when the 80s, they were like, so they were losing market share to Pepsi. And Pepsi's like, I don't know, sweeter or something. They figured out. So they reformulated Coke. So they call it New Coke. And they didn't give you an option. Yeah. And people went berserk, you know, because it's like, this is like, this is the drink I had with my grandmother who I loved and whatever. Now she's gone. Right. You can't change that on me, You're basically like, hurting the memory of my. That's right. Yeah. My association with my relatives.
I do remember reading about that, and then I think there was some story of like it was like a 33% dip in sales when they tried changing.
Oh, but it wasn't even more than that. It was like protests outside the headquarters. It was just like mayhem. But it just tells you that's the opposite. That's the sign of what that brand is worth or means.
Well, don't worry, everyone at home. We're not going to change the name of Flexwork. I know you guys have gotten used to seeing Flexwork everywhere. But, we have some grandiose visions for this idea of a co-working space with the content studio. Yeah. And, I know the idea of a podcast studio in New Jersey is pretty novel. There's some stuff in New York City. There's some stuff in LA. But in the state of New Jersey, it doesn't exist. And when we looked at the research to try and find something that was like this, we didn't find anything. Why do you think that is?
Well, one reason, I'm just guessing, of course, I'm not an expert in this area, but I would say podcasting is relatively new. Relatively to, other media. So it's sort of like, I don't know, 10 years old, maybe less. I personally have only started listening to podcasts and watching podcasts like really in the last 3 to 4 years.
Really? When did your podcast start?
Mine is like 2 years old.
Oh, wow.
But
you've had like hundreds of episodes.
No, only 15.
15.
Yeah, they haven't all been released. But I mean, but the more established podcasts are the ones that started earlier, and they're also good. You know, I mean, Joe Rogan's like probably one of the earlier ones. You know, there's a bunch on the investing capital side that I listen to, like Invest Like the Best is one of them. Patrick O'Shaughnessy's podcast, but you know, those are 5 or 6 years old. I mean, they're not like, there's no podcast I can think of that are like 10 years old. And but you know, so, and I'm not necessarily an early adopter, obviously, but now it's a big part of my I would say inputs, you know what I mean? Like I read a lot of books, I read a lot of stuff, and I also listen to podcasts. And I watch YouTube videos, you know.
Of the Disruption podcast.
And other things, yes.
So I guess being as worldly as you are today and understanding the vision that we have for the podcast studio, I mean, do you feel like we are going to disrupt the space of content consumption or content creation for business owners in this Northeast market?
I mean, I don't know that, you know, the answer. I mean, it would be great if we got that big, but I think like there's different levels of adding value, right? Like I have this investment firm. Like I didn't disrupt the whole investment management industry yet. I'd love to, but I haven't figured that part out. But I've built a very good, team and a very good offering and a very loyal base of customers who have gotten a lot of value out of what I've been able to do. So, you know, I'd call that like, is that disruptive? Well, sure. You know, for those people, it's been disruptive, you know, the people that I serve. And if I was better at marketing, I'd probably have, you know, served a lot more people. So, you know, like there's different levels of success, you know, with like VC, it's all like go big or go home, you know, but I don't think most businesses are in that model. So like here we are, we're in the one podcast room. Now we're going to, you know, expand by having multiple studios downstairs, and that space is going to give us the opportunity to do a bunch of things we can't do in this one room. And, you know, then I think we go from there. So it is a different form of iteration or compounding. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So let's talk about these 20 plus years of Ridgewood Investments. I mean, were there times where you thought maybe you should give up?
No. The only time when I when I was tempted to like take a job or something was really in that first couple of years. And because I would get calls from headhunters that would offer me these, you know, very attractive, compensation-wise attractive opportunities, and just a handful. And at the same time, you know, you don't have anything really significant coming in, so you're talking like a massive pay raise, but then you're giving up on your vision and your dream or whatever. But that only was like really about the first 2 years. And I mean, to give you a sense of scale, like probably by the end of the second year, you know, I was making like maybe $90K or something from, you know, what was left over. And I'm doing everything myself, by the way, right? So I'm keeping my costs very lean. I didn't even have an office at that time. I was still working out of, it was either like my side bedroom or like I had just gotten a Regis where and it was a virtual plan. It wasn't even like I was going there every day.
So when did Flexwork and Jay come about officially?
I bought the building, I would say roughly 5 years ago. And then it took about 5 or maybe like 5.5. And then it took about almost like 9 months because we basically renovated the whole building, you know, and we were going to do the basement, but then, you know, we had this flood issue and whatever. And so we ended up just sort of holding off on that. And the pandemic happened, and, you know, it was sort of like, I'm glad I didn't.
So what was this building before?
This was, for the longest time, it was owned by a CPA firm. And if you had come here, the layout was like very different, a much more closed, no glass, like none of that, right? And I had help from a great architect. he just helped me like conceptualize how we open up the plan. So I got an architect to, basically another architect, because he just doing that as a favor to me. He's like an architect that's like, $10-20 million commercial projects. But he's in Entrepreneurs Organization, shout out to EO, which is a global organization of entrepreneurs that are successful. And so through that, he helped me do that relatively inexpensively. And then I had the idea of like, I want glass, and I want, more open line of offices, and the roughly, like, I told him like, I want a boardroom, and I want a small room or whatever. And it worked out great. And part of my thing is like, I like design because it's a way to create value.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people, like if you see the outside of the building and they walk in, they're like really surprised. Like, oh, wow, I didn't expect it to be like this.
Yeah.
Because it's like super nice,
Yeah.
But it's just the space that I wanted. And I really believe that design can be used to create value, basically for free, or even for like less than free, right? Like I have a house in the Hamptons that I built from scratch in 2015. It was finished, and most of the design I did myself. And as I did here, like I picked the flooring and the colors and all the furniture, and I got it from China. So it was like 50%. We saved like 50% on the build out of this place. But and then it was a challenge. Like it took a while to fill up, and now we're getting and this is the thing about that idea of being open, was I had this idea, but I never done it before, but I just kind of like kept going, right? So I designed the space. Now I have a nice space, but nobody's like here. But we created a website, but that has led to all these other things. The studio, and then the studio is now bringing new people here who get to see, and then we get to build relationships with them, and it just becomes sort of a flywheel.
Yeah.
It's now 6 years into the journey of my original germ of an idea, and it's like coming true.
It's gotta be exciting.
It is exciting.
So on this podcast, we obviously present that it's the Disruption Podcast, and Ludwig and I run a disruption marketing agency. And, we're right about that time where we like to flip the script and give you an opportunity to ask us some questions that you might have, knowing Ludwig's background is one of the most famous talent managers and photographers in a variety of different industries. And then my background is like a e-com marketer and everything that I do.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have any questions for us?
Well, I mean, I don't know as much about like photography and things like that. So I'd love to know from Ludwig, like what are some of the coolest experiences of doing that job or photographing people?
It's a great question. I think for me, one of the coolest things was, so I shoot in the bodybuilding industry a lot. And when you first get started, you're just shooting anybody who comes your way, right? Just like you took the first clients of your parents, and that's how I got started for me. It was like my brother's ex-girlfriend. And then as you start to grow and people start to get to know you, you start to get the ability to shoot more important people, more successful bodybuilders. And when I got to the point where I was shooting people that were at the top of the bodybuilding industry, and when I was shooting them for covers of famous fitness magazines like Muscle and Fitness and any of the top magazines out there, to me that was kind of a great thing, because you measure success in many different ways, and for me that was one of the things that led me to believe that there was something in this for me, like the ability to meet some of the great female bodybuilders, male bodybuilders, capture their images and put them on a magazine that circulated worldwide, and then being able to walk into a Walgreens or a Barnes and Noble's magazine section and see my artwork on a cover of a magazine. Like, to me, that's always been one of the coolest things. Walking into various gyms and seeing like a photo they took off my Instagram, blew it up and put it on their wall in Chicago somewhere. Like, stuff like that always blows my mind, to see that you can create something. Like, I can take a photo here today and that photo reaches millions of eyes. To me, that's kind of one of the coolest things.
Seeing your art on something is very interesting.
It is.
So I've seen people tattoo logos that I've designed on their bodies, right? Yeah. I remember the first time we went to the Olympia Expo in 2013, and literally there's like 6 people showing me that they have shreds tattoos. I was just like, whoa, like that's permanent ink on your body for the rest of your life. And I designed that logo. And I mean, it was one thing to see my work on a product, like a label or packaging, but like for someone to put it on their body, I was like, whoa, that's crazy.
And my question for you is that, like, so I think you're at this earlier stage of your entrepreneurial journey, sort of like I was, although maybe it's 2.0 for you because you had shreds. But so what do you think? Like, where are you at?
In terms of
You're restarting as an entrepreneur after working somewhere.
I had a conversation about this with someone recently, and I think I'm actually at like 4.0, to be honest, right? The amount of times I've had to start back over in my life. But the beauty is, I think 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0 all taught me everything not to do in how I'm building things out, and gave me an MBA 3 times over of all the different types of things you're supposed to learn, but they don't teach you in school, right? Just like in law school, they didn't teach you how to do certain things. They don't teach you any of this stuff in grade school or in academia or anything like that. But the journey that we're on now in this new version of the agency and everything that we're doing is one where we're building it brick by brick, and we're trying to create longevity. Recurring monthly revenue is a big like slogan for us right now, looking at the MRR. And the really exciting part is that the team that is being built is a solid team. Every aspect and every person that's on the team, they're here for a reason, and they're here behind the vision of what we're trying to build. And everyone's got a bit of partnership, which has been something that's been different for me this time around, where there's total transparency on revenue, there's total transparency on the pipeline and knowing what money is coming in. And we have the client side, which is probably something that I haven't broken down for you, right? But there's the clients that will pay us X to do certain things, and then there's house brands. And I've kind of shared the house brands with everyone so that everyone kind of is incentivized to help build those house brands, but we're taking the revenue and profit from client brands to get those house brands up and running. What's cool is that like Flexwork Studio is one of those house brands, and we're super stoked to get the basement up and running, and the capability of creating higher level content is just happening like week after week. I think just last week I dropped a new video, which is a totally different editing style. Got a huge response from it. There was 6 different entrepreneurs that reached out to me like, hey, I want to make that content for myself. Can you help me out? And that only happened because we were experimenting and coming up with new strategies, ways to go about it internally. And I'm super excited to see where everything's going. And we're fortunate and blessed that guys like Ludwig and myself have continued to have our finger on the pulse of where things are going with creative and content and marketing. So it's a fun time to be an agency owner.
The other thing too is the network piece that we get to get involved with and work with guys like yourself. I mean, Ankur and I have been working in certain industries for so long that we've made tons and tons of connections that now we're able to leverage these conversations, these connections to help bring in new business, help them grow, and help this whole ecosystem continue to thrive.
Yeah, that was actually my original idea of having the co-working space, was that it wasn't even about like renting out the space. It was about creating like a community of entrepreneurs who would potentially all help each other to grow and learn and have fun.
And that's what's happening. That's exactly what's happening.
And my piece of it, which is the investing capital side, because a lot of people are capital constrained. And so if you kind of have good opportunities and you can lift the constraint on capital and funding, then potentially you could create a lot of value together. Right. Yeah.
How big is your organization right now?
We're like about 10 or 12 people.
Nationwide?
And some internationally as well.
Nice.
A couple internationally, but about 10 roughly in the United States. And then we manage, up 300 to 350 million USD in various investment pools and funds for, 150 or 200 clients, somewhere in there.
What does the next iteration of Ridgewood Investments look like? What's the next level for you?
So for us, this is very much what I'm working on. So, 0 to where we are at now is, has been a long journey and has been great. And I've really enjoyed it. What I'm trying to do now is grow more as a leader and empower others to help me scale from here. So I read the book. I'm sure you guys have heard about it because it's around. It's called 10X is Easier Than 2X by Ben Hardy. And so that inspired me. I actually heard him speak at one of my masterminds that I attended, not the one that we're in together. So I was like, yeah, I want a 10X, and not just 10X in terms of the assets, but in every way, right? The value that we deliver to people. So in order to do that, I mean, I'm a big believer that ultimately my mindset and my, how I show up as an entrepreneur leader is probably the thing that's gonna, constrain my company or catapult it. So really all the work is just, I have to make myself better. And, but so I'm learning. And so I'm trying to, like, for example, I'm more of a visionary / investor type. I'm not great when it comes to like creating systems and processes. That's just not that's one of my superpowers. But now I realize so I have to empower other people who are great at systems and processes to, bring that part of it. So we're actually right in the midst of sort of creating systems and processes, empowering other folks to do a lot of those things, letting me then free up my time from a lot of those things to focus more on my superpowers, which is, teaching and educating and building relationships and visionary type activities. And so that makes it fun, right? Like if I was just to do, if my next 20 years were just the way my last 20 were, like it'd be fine, but it's not as much growth as now that I have this framework of 10X. I'm going to have to really grow as a person, and I'm going to have to help my whole team grow. And we're going to have to really grow. The best way to 10X is to 10X the value we give to people. And so obviously, how do you do that?
Yeah.
I'll take a 10X valuation for sure all day.
I think we all would, right?
Yeah.
I think it was in the first 30 days, I just handed my money to Ken. I was like, here you go, man. Just like put it in whatever small bucket you can. I know it's not enough to qualify, but please just manage this for me because I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. And actually, I mean, and this is an interesting point. So I deal with obviously like a lot of folks, and it's really about compounding. So you can start with a small amount. As long as you save and we compound, you're going to end up with a pretty good result, I think, and that's what's happened. Like you look at like my parents or my in-laws, it's been life-changing for them. They're just regular people, right? They just saved, but they didn't know about investing. They just happen to know me, and now they have life-changing result. But that's a common thing. Like people think like, okay, like you see all these social media people or whoever, right? Folks like I was when I was in my 20s or 30s, I had a high income, but I didn't know about investing. And that's a lot of people. Like the people who aren't in that position of having a high income. I mean, you had a very high income, I'm sure, in your heyday at Shreds and whatever. You will again, with this journey. But people don't understand that you have to take that, and then there's all these other issues. So like folks who are not in that position, right? Folks who are say maybe struggling paycheck to paycheck or whatever, they think like, oh, well, if I could just make X, whatever X is for them, like all my problems are solved, I'll be happy, everything will be great. And the reality is that's probably not going to happen.
No.
But if you have the right frameworks at least on the financial and investing and all of that, then the amount of freedom you get over time, you'll get to keep it.
Yeah.
And you won't have these reversals. A lot of entrepreneurs, they get these cycles where they had success, they couldn't hold on to it, slipped through their fingers, then they do it again and they slip through their fingers again. That is completely avoidable. That never needs to happen.
Got
You just have to make the right moves.
If only I had Ken in my life back in 2014.
Right.
But I feel like anyone listening right now is probably having a bunch of light bulb moments where it's like, wait a second, what did he just say? I want to rewind for a couple minutes to hear that back again. I cannot count how many of those I've had with Ken when he talks about money management and investment management. From the ideas that he's posted on his own YouTube about like how to invest $1,000 and maximize it, the ideas of how compounding is really broken down, and the silly notion that you're supposed to buy low, sell high, and how easily we all slip on that concept because human nature is just all about FOMO, right? And when people are jumping in and the price is going higher, that's the wrong time to buy.
Right.
And you just, you can't help it. It's just what everyone is doing all around you. So Ken shares so much of this wisdom on his YouTube channel, now on Instagram with all these reels. I think this new car thing that you're starting is super cool.
Yeah, I got a little car camera holder, so I'm driving anyway. I just, stream of consciousness sometimes.
I forward it over to a bunch of friends every
Hit the
time. Like,
record
what's a good
button.
one? It's cool. And I mean, he's just spreading this content wherever he can so that people can make better, more sound decisions. So, I mean, how can people find you?
I follow, LinkedIn, Ken Majmudar, Instagram, Ken Majmudar.
If anyone has trouble spelling
YouTube.
it, don't worry. It'll be in the caption and the title
YouTube.
of the episode
Yeah,
and
yeah.
everything there. But no, Ken's YouTube is fire. I highly recommend people check that out. And Ken, I mean, it's been awesome having you on the podcast. Thanks for
been
coming
great.
down.
Yeah, man.
How
Thank
was
you.
it?
I loved it. It was great.
Yeah, it's cool having an engineer on site, right?
Definitely.
So, guys, we'll check you guys out in the next episode. And thanks again for tuning in.
See ya.